The North American Free Trade Agreement, a trilateral free trade accord with the United States, Canada, and Mexico, has proven itself to be one of the most contentious economic endeavors of the last 20 years. Born out of meticulous diplomacy and heated debate, NAFTA has been, is, and will continue to be one of the defining cornerstones of modern American economic policy. NAFTA was signed into law on December 8, 1993, and came into full force on January 1, 1994.
In a few moments, I will sign the North American Free Trade Act into law. NAFTA will tear down trade barriers between our three nations.
Yet to this day, NAFTA remains divisive. Some laud it as one of the crowning achievements of the Clinton administration. Others denounce it as an utter failure. And though President Clinton played a lead role in NAFTA's ratification, its origins go further back. It begins with President Ronald Reagan. Less than a year into his presidency, Reagan called for a North American Common Market. Soon enough, in 1984, Congress passed the Trade and Tariff Act, which gave the president greater flexibility in entering into bilateral trade agreements. Consequently, the Canadian-United States Free Trade Agreement was passed and took effect in 1989. Reagan's successor, President George H.W. Bush, took over right where Reagan had left off. With the cooperation of Mexican President Carlos Salinas, the U.S. and Mexico entered negotiations to lift trade barriers, with Prime Minister Brian Mulroney of Canada formally requesting to join in 1991. These discussions created NAFTA, but with trilateral diplomatic negotiations still heating up, President Bush was unable to fast-track NAFTA as he had originally intended. Instead, he passed the mantle to incoming President Clinton, who now faced the nation in debate. His opposition was fierce.
We are the Teamsters! We are the Teamsters!
Those opposing NAFTA lashed out at the fear of U.S. jobs being lost to Mexico en masse. Organizations like the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and the United Auto Workers became vocal, fearful of the devastating effect that cheaper Mexican labor would have on American blue-collar workers. They were concerned that production jobs would be targeted, jobs which had been the backbone of the American working class since World War II. 1992 presidential nominee H. Ross Perot warned of a massive sucking sound that would seize American jobs, and he launched a campaign against NAFTA's ratification.
We have got to stop sending jobs overseas. And you don't care about anything but making money, there will be a giant sucking sound going south.
In addition, environmentalists noted the ecological destruction which could occur, citing Mexico's lax environmental regulations. Concerns for human rights were projected, as many organizations feared an exploitation of Mexican cheap labor. But to an extent, that was it. Debate was limited, as was media scrutiny. Former White House press secretary for President Clinton, Mike McCurry, said in a personal interview, "People generally knew about the issue, but knew and understood very little of the details. Media coverage tended to focus on politics instead of economic substance." And while opposition was fierce, the proponents were fiercer. NAFTA was portrayed as being the solution to the unstable Mexican economy, one that had suffered recently from a long period of stagflation and an artificially propped peso which had begun to drop. President Clinton argued that because NAFTA would boost Mexico economically, it would pave the way for a more democratic and prosperous state to emerge. Proponents expanded on that by saying economic prosperity in Mexico would stunt illegal immigration into the U.S. In terms of political muscle, every president since Jimmy Carter had endorsed NAFTA. Furthermore, organizations like the Chamber of Commerce and Fortune 500 lobby group USA NAFTA launched heavily financed campaigns lauding NAFTA as a move that would elevate America into a manufacturer of high sophistication goods. Products of lower complexity could thus be made more cheaply in Mexico, taking advantage of geographic specialization. Such debates echoed throughout the nation. Determined to pass NAFTA, President Clinton compromised and added clauses to NAFTA addressing job loss and environmental concerns to quell debate. Furthermore, President Clinton promised retraining for American workers who would lose their jobs due to NAFTA-related outsourcing. Yet these developments proved not to be enough. The Clinton administration became more and more proactive and took to the airways, with Vice President Al Gore leading the way. In one of his most memorable debates, he faced off against Ross Perot, one of the leading, most vocal critics of NAFTA. The stakes were high, as the bill's vote for ratification was only days away. The nation's reaction would be integral in pushing those on the fence in Congress.
Welcome to a special edition of Larry King Live.
In one corner, Vice President Gore, appearing poised, articulate, and knowledgeable.
I mean, humor me if you would.
No, I won't. I don't think I can. Now, next thing.
In the other, Ross Perot, sounding often petty, defensive, and emotionally volatile. The two titans had clashed, and Gore had come out on top.
So I was just one of a team of staffers supporting the Vice President going into that debate, but we were very pleased and proud of his performance, and it really turned the tide in which I think a lot of Americans who had been made to fear.
Upon voting a few days later, NAFTA had passed in the Senate by a vote of 61 to 38, with one vote abstaining. The vote narrowly passed in the House, 234 to 200. Gore's performance had been pivotal, and the Clinton administration had won, and according to them, so had the American people. And in fact, many effects of NAFTA were beneficial. According to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, trade among NAFTA nations increased threefold from $297 billion to $930 billion. For the U.S., trade with NAFTA nations now accounts for a third of all exports. Mexican think tank GEA reported prices of household goods in Mexico have more than halved due to imports from NAFTA. Furthermore, since NAFTA's ratification, U.S. employment increased from 110.8 million in 1993 to 137.6 million people in 2007. While growth was not solely from NAFTA, most economists agree that NAFTA did contribute, the opposite of the cataclysm which Perot had warned of. Moreover, NAFTA helped improve trilateral diplomatic ties, setting foundations for increased integration, far cries from the three nations' protectionist past. However, many predicted downfalls of NAFTA came into fruition as well. Despite overall employment increases, U.S. production jobs were lost as companies outsourced to Mexico. Maquiladoras, production towns built on the U.S.-Mexico border, increased significantly in number, and cheap Mexican labor was exploited, breaking down their social structure and facilitating movement out of rural Mexico.
So you have sort of an odd social structure in large parts of rural Mexico now. The most productive work ages, work years, either in the cities or in the United States.
Mexico also saw devastation in domestic agriculture, unable to compete with U.S. imports. The North American Agreement on Environmental Cooperation, a side treaty of NAFTA created to address environmental concerns, has been largely ineffective with only a $9 million budget to work with. There have also been unforeseen consequences, as well as promises which have fallen short. For one, while Mexico matured from a one-party state, corruption runs rampant in antagonism to democratic openness. Furthermore, though President Clinton promised retraining with NAFTA Transitional Adjustment Assistance, it has met with limited success. While NAFTA displaced Americans could find new work in the booming 90s economy, a large number found themselves pushed into lower-wage jobs, unhelpful to the U.S.'s growing income inequality. Moreover, Mexican economic growth after NAFTA has, at best, been average. With GDP growing annually around 3%, Mexican economic growth failed to meet predictions. Finally, NAFTA did not curb Mexican illegal immigration into the U.S. In fact, illegal immigration has steadily risen. These broken promises were ones that could truly never be fulfilled with only a free trade agreement.
All the country's problems. No trade agreement is going to overnight make any economy into a spectacularly efficient and dynamic economy.
But with all its successes and failures, NAFTA has proven to have a lasting impact. As the Bush administration negotiated bilateral FTAs like the Australia, Bahrain, and Korea-US FTA, many countries voiced similar concerns projected during the NAFTA debates. NAFTA was in fact used as the model for those bilateral FTAs and the Free Trade Agreement of the Americas, an FTA for the US and almost all of Latin America. And as America progresses, NAFTA lives on, for better or for worse. It's sparking back into life from FTA to FTA, leaving a formidable economic cornerstone for years to come.